as long as you stay tuned to just chillin' with Men Talent.
He always runs. Let the rhythm hit him.
We have an exciting program. Hope you'll stay with us during this viewing. My guest today is Mark Bondison, Dr. Mark Bondison, although you said you'd prefer Mark.
Yes.
So we'll call him Mark. He's a psychologist. He is with the VA hospital here in Cleveland, specifically with their substance abuse program, and that's what we're going to talk about. Who's eligible, what the program offers, and if it's applicable for someone you know, how you can get in touch with them and access the services if that's appropriate. So please stay with us. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
We're glad you could be here.
Thank you.
Let's start out as we always do. Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little general background.
All right, I'm a psychologist, obviously. Came to Cleveland from Chicago about 12 years ago to actually do my internship at the Cleveland VA, and stayed on. There was an opening in the addiction programs in the alcohol ward at the time, and I was fortunate enough to get that, so I stayed here in Cleveland and evolved to where I'm at today in the programs.
For those that may not know, and one of the things, as I said before the show, I always there's always an assumption that there may be a few people that don't understand some of the terms that's used. We may have some students out there who are watching who are considering different opportunities in terms of professions, who may have heard the term psychologist. What exactly, or how would you define in a simple way, what do psychologists do?
In a simple way, boy.
If that's possible.
All right. Essentially, I think what sets a psychologist apart from other folks who haven't quite attained that level is education and training. To become a psychologist, you must obviously get a bachelor's degree, and then typically a master's degree, and then a doctorate degree in psychology. Go ahead.
You understand the psychology doesn't deal with the physical so much, but more the psychological makeup of an individual?
Typically, although over the years recently, there's actually much more of a blend. We talk a lot about mind-body connections now.
Okay.
So there actually is much more of a blend between physical and emotional or psychological disability or illness or impairment. So while traditionally in the past, psychologists would have dealt more specifically with psychological issues, now it's, again, more blended.
Okay. A young person who may be watching, who may be considering or at one time thought about maybe becoming a psychologist, would you say that some of the basic needs, if you have to be a people person, you have to be a good listener, those would be some qualities you'd want to possess?
Absolutely. Although some people would say I'm not a people person, but no, typically one should clearly be a people person and have the ability to listen. I think typically listen in a bit of a detached way, so you can almost step outside what's happening and integrate the story that's being told to you in a way that you're not caught up into it. And be able to empathize and connect with people. I think being able to connect is probably the biggest quality that people need.
Another way of helping folks. Again, our guest is Mark Bondison, Dr. Bondison, who is a psychologist who's with the VA hospital here in Cleveland. VA, Veterans Administration, what does it all mean, Mark? Veterans Hospital is for whom?
Veterans Administration Healthcare System of Ohio, as it was recently renamed a couple of years ago, provides health care for all eligible veterans nationally. And eligibility can be a bit tricky, although in recent years eligibility rules have become more broad and more easily, the system's more easily accessible now. But anyone who basically served in the armed services and got an honorable discharge, although that's not technically correct, is probably eligible for services.
So armed services would be U.S. Army, Coast Guard?
Coast Guard.
Marine Corps?
Marines.
Air Force?
Air Force. Navy.
Navy. Covered pretty much all,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to have been in combat or served during wartime,
Absolutely
right?
not.
As long as you were in uniform, as you said, honorably discharged, although there may be some variance on that
right,
today.
Right.
that then you qualify as a veteran, and therefore the services that are offered through the Veterans Administration Health.
Right, and it's a full range of health care. In fact, the VA offers some health care services, both emotional and medical, that aren't offered anywhere else in the country. There used to be a criteria, and this is, I think, an important point. One of the criteria for eligibility used to be an income cutoff, and that no longer exists as of a couple of years ago. Oftentimes, veterans who make a little bit more money may think they're not eligible for health care service from the VA, and they indeed are.
And one of the, I guess this would be an appropriate place to put in the number. If one is not sure, or you'd like to know more detail about the services, some of which we're going to talk about here, you can find out the general information or specific by calling which number?
If they actually, at this point, call my office, which is area code 440-526-3030, extension 6875.
Say that one more time, only a little slower. Area code?
440-526-3030, extension 6875.
And you can direct them to the proper resource if you can't answer their question.
Absolutely.
Okay. And again, you'll be talking to Mark Bondison if you make that call. You're specifically with one part of services offered by the VA, and that's their substance abuse program. Obviously, veterans, men, women, have alcohol, other drug problems like other individuals. And it's in our conversation before, you indicated that veterans don't necessarily have a higher or lower level of alcoholism chemical dependency. It's pretty much the same as general population, right?
Right.
But you said something very interesting. Your addiction program, or the services under that umbrella, just aren't about alcohol and other drugs, but that there are different components. Could you tell us generally some of the different things that are offered under that umbrella?
Kind of the continuum of care?
Okay.
Sure. When someone comes to us, we initially do an intake, which basically is just gathering some basic introductory information to do a brief assessment of where the person, one, determine eligibility, and then two, determine briefly where they are at with their drug and or alcohol use and what services they may need from us.
So a wife, let's say if I'm the person, I'm a veteran, let's say I was a Vietnam veteran, a wife has been complaining about my use of alcohol. Maybe I smoke a little marijuana now and then. I don't think it's a big deal. She seems to think it is. I call VA and I say, I want to come in, and you're saying that part of that initial response is that assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that initial intake, which is very brief, we could do that over the phone at that moment when the person called in. And depending on what we found on that, then we could schedule them for more.
What kinds of things might you ask or might be asked that would help in that initial screening?
A little bit, just briefly about their drug and alcohol use history.
We'll play it out. I drink every day. I don't think it's a big deal. I can drink considerably more alcohol than before, and I seem to need it every day. I don't feel well if I don't get my daily dose.
Okay. Again, there's an intake form we would go down, but we would certainly pursue that a little further. We would ask whether, as you got up in the morning, you would have a drink. What time is your first drink of the day?
I feel real shaky if I don't get the drink.
And that drink settles those shakes down.
Right.
We would have you come in.
Right.
Real simply, we'd have you come in to do a more thorough assessment to determine initially whether or not we had to detoxify you from alcohol or heroin or whatever else you were using.
Right. And that's where I was leading with this, obviously, and you knew, and that's to make the point that sometimes it's not just a matter of collecting the verbal pieces of the puzzle, but a person may need, because of their physical addiction to the drug, may need to come in and be medically supervised and kind of stepping down from that drug use or being taken off that drug.
Absolutely.
Because certainly alcohol addiction can be life-threatening.
Yes.
And that's a message I think that people need to understand, that you don't want to necessarily clean up before you make the call or present. because you may be putting yourself at risk.
Absolutely. We prefer that if someone calls us who's actively using either drugs or alcohol, particularly if it is alcohol, since withdrawal from alcohol, as you said, can be life-threatening, we would prefer that someone does not stop drinking until they actually set foot on grounds with us, and we can better assess what their needs are medically to make sure they're safe.
Right, and that's an important point. Okay, let's assume that you've gotten me in, I've been detoxed, or that's been addressed. There's no threat of further physical problem or any risk to my health. Now what can I expect as a person in this program? Are they going to pull out a Bible and thump on the Bible and talk fire and brimstone and what a terrible sinner I am for
no.
using?
Although not too many years ago, probably, but not anymore. Actually, the first thing we would do is do a very thorough assessment. Again, once a person is stable, when we initially start to detox an individual, as one could imagine, the brain's not always working quite right. And it can be real difficult to get any reliable information during that period. Once that has the person has a chance to stabilize, not only be detoxed physically from the chemical, but actually stable, we begin a very thorough assessment where they'll be assigned what we call a case facilitator, who will do, again, what we call a psychosocial interview, which is get their life history, not only their drug and alcohol use history, but other aspects of their life. Give them a variety of psychological tests that we help get them through. Probably the primary one is called the Addiction Severity Index, which gives a very detailed history from childhood right up to present day of all drug use. We have then a team with a psychologist and the case facilitator and a nurse who sit with the individual patient, gather all that data and make a plan with the patient's input.
And that assessment and gathering that data might be likened to collecting pieces of a puzzle and then kind of seeing how that all fits together. And then based on that picture, in a sense, that's formed, helps yourself and the other helping folks who are there kind of decide how to best service or the best kind of treatment for this person. Mark, I saw our cameraman Chris kind of give me the, I assume you were giving me the sign that it was almost time to break, either that or I did something wrong, but I want to remind our viewers that we're talking with Mark Bondison, who is a psychologist. He's with the
Veterans Administration Healthcare System of Ohio.
You said that very well. We're talking about the substance abuse services through the VA hospital. This is the first half. We've just kind of gotten into what's happening and part of the assessment. We hope you'll stay with us after this short musical interlude, and we're going to find out more and again remind you how you can be a part of it. This musical break, we're going to hear a tune entitled, I think it's Guidance, and it's by Guru.
I know him well.
Certainly one of the popular ones.
That's about to be born. So by the time you people hear this record, my son will be born. And I gotta teach him about life.